Hi, welcome to Community Homeworks workshop this evening. I'm glad you're joining us. My name is Jason Byler. I'm the Education Manager here at Community Homeworks. If you're watching this live, please comment to let us know where you are tuning in from. We want to know who we're reaching and who we're not reaching. Also, if you'd like to join the discussion or if you want to ask a question along the way, please put that in the comment section as well. And we will put that through to our instructors and let them answer the question if they can. If they can't answer it, we'll say, well, we'll have to get back to you on that. And that works as well. If you're watching this after the broadcast, we're still glad you're here. We're glad you're tuning in. And you can still ask questions in the comments section, but it's going to take us a little longer to respond because we're not all tuned in at the same time. So those questions are always welcome. Please share them as you will. Community Homeworks is a nonprofit organization with a mission to empower homeowners to maintain safe, sustainable, and dignified homes. We get our funding from grants and gifts and donations. So if you find value in the workshop that we're doing tonight, we encourage you to donate on our website. Our website is communityhomeworks.org, and that will be scrolling across the screen briefly. Tonight's workshop is actually a virtual discussion. We have several of our instructors who have taught other classes for us joining us. We're going to be talking about winter tips and tricks. And it seems like it's a great time to do that because we've got a storm coming in the next couple days. So we don't know what that's going to bring for our area, for Kalamazoo or for West Michigan. But we want to be prepared, and we want you to be prepared as well. To start, we have 4 instructors joining us, and Sam might join us a little bit later. But we look forward to your participation out there in cyberspace by making comments. We also look forward to hearing what our instructors have to say. First instructor I'll introduce is Harry, and there's Harry. Hi, Harry.
Hey, how you doing?
Harry has a history of teaching building trades and other related classes on the east side of the state. He retired to this side of the state. We're glad you're here, Harry. Here to add to the conversation, and we appreciate your support of Community Homeworks.
Next, I'm going to introduce Community Homeworks, and we enjoy it.
Next, I'm going to introduce Gary. There's Gary, and Gary is he comes from Indiana, but he lives in Kalamazoo area now, and he had been HVAC and plumbing, I believe it was, at a college down there. And what do you do now, Gary?
Some building inspection out in Oshabo and Cooper.
All right. Well, we're thankful you're here as well, Gary. Next, I'm going to invite Ian to join us. There's Ian. And I believe Ian, I don't know much about Ian, but I think he works at WMU. Is that correct?
That is correct. I'm a carpenter in facilities management. So.
Perfect. Thank you very much for joining us, Ian. And also joining us tonight is Julie. And Julie is connected to Ian. So she's how we found Ian. Julie has taught several classes for us before, and Ian has come along and helped a few times. But Julie is the authority on things like storm windows and screen repair and things like that. She's taught a lot of those classes. What else do you specialize in, Julie? You're muted. Julie, you're muted. Julie, you're muted and I can't unmute you. Still can't hear you. We lost Julie. We'll see if she joins us again. So starting out, we've got a storm coming. We don't know what's coming with that storm. They're saying heavy snow. They're saying rain. They're saying we could get ice. We don't know if we'll have power outages, but that's often a thing that we run into. But there's lots of other things that come along with that. Harry, what's one thing you wanted to share tonight about what to expect or what to be careful of?
Well, I thought I would go a little bit off topic, or at least away from the home thing, and discuss a little bit about what you need to know about if you got to deal with your car or driving in this kind of weather. I know we're talking about a storm coming. As we know here in Michigan, oftentimes it's a hype, or it really does get us. And you mentioned the rain. Well, I'm looking out here. I'm here in Oshtemo, and we are getting rain right now. So anyway, a lot of what I'll say. And do you want me to break this down into several units, or just go right through the whole thing?
No, sure. Break it into several units. Well, because that will probably spark some conversation for somebody else as well.
Okay, very good. Well, the main thing that you got to keep in mind during the winter months, especially, is keeping your car maintained. I mean, well, that goes with all year long. But in the wintertime, there's a couple things. And again, I might be going over things that are just common knowledge, but that's okay. If you hear it again, it helps you to remember, or at least think about. Wintertime, definitely check your tires out. Make sure there's enough tread. If you can afford them, get some winter tires. They tend to have a little more aggressive tread, and the tread material just tends to be a little bit softer, and it helps you get through the snow. But again, if you've got tires that are just really well down to the tread where it's almost what we used to call bald, that's not so good to be out in the winter. Also, make sure you've got a good battery in your car. Auto batteries, well, all batteries don't hold up so well in cold weather. They lose some power. And if you can't get your car started, then that's another issue. And the thing that a lot of people just tend to neglect is the wiper blades. Take a moment to look at your wiper blades, make sure they're clean. I usually use a little bit of rubbing alcohol, just run it across to kind of clean it up. If they're really in bad shape, replace the darn things. They're not terribly expensive. If not, just some really, really fine sandpaper, just lightly go across the bottom just to kind of help it out. And make sure that you got fluid in your fluid reservoir, because you know when you're driving down the roads, trucks, cars, other things splash on you. And the windshield, I've driven too many times when I couldn't see out the window, and it's just a real pain. Also, take a few moments out to check your lights, make sure they're all working. Just because it's more difficult to see your particular vehicle, and if the lights are bad, then it doesn't show up as well. Another little point that came up, and I read about, is do some practice driving. And what they were saying was find a parking lot that's snowy, ice covered, and do some maneuvers to help you drive. I mean, I don't know, that kind of sounds like a little hokey, but in any event, what can it hurt? You can go on, or you want me to go? Let's go on to somebody else, and I'll come back with some of the other things I need to talk about.
Well,
all right, Gary or Ian, do you have anything you'd like to add about driving in winter?
I'll throw in a couple, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I like to use the windshield washer fluid. I like to use the good Rain-X, super cold fluid. I don't do this, but it's best to drive on the top half of the gas tank instead of the bottom half of the gas tank. I'm guilty. I am guilty. And I can't read my other note. Oh, that's a shame.
Gary, you have an electric car, is that correct?
Yes, and I've noticed where I should be seeing 53 miles range, I'm seeing about 45 today.
Okay, I was wondering how much the cold weather affected
The cold
the
weather
capacity of
affects
your
it.
batteries.
It
Okay.
does. It does. And part of it expects, cabin heat is part of it too.
Right.
And then it does like to cycle the engine on a little bit here and there. What was my other note? I may think of it later, I hope.
All right. Ian, do you have anything to add about driving or car maintenance for?
Yeah, I would also
for
add,
winter?
if you have them, carry around a set of jumper cables in your trunk or somewhere in your car in case either you have battery troubles or someone else does and you could give them a hand. Sometimes it's smart to store like a small shovel. So if you do find yourself stuck, you can, perhaps dig yourself out. Obviously, keep a good snow brush and scraper. Definitely clean your car out. There's nothing worse than kind of taking off and then having all the snow like either fall off and blind somebody behind you, or it slides down on the windshield. And then again, you can't see through it to drive. So
I like those people who clear this much space and then
yeah,
drive.
right.
Well, actually, those are some of the things that I'm glad you brought those up, because those are some of the things I was going to bring up a little later on.
Perfect. Harry, how do you check to know whether your battery's good or not? Because in my experience, it's good one day and the next day you get a cold snap and it just will not start it.
Well, I mean, there's ways to check it. Generally, if you go to a service area, or even sometimes you can go to an auto parts store and they can check your battery out. I can almost guarantee they're going to tell you your battery's not so good, because they're selling batteries too. But I knew that my battery wasn't good and we've got a 3-year-old car, and I knew the battery wasn't good because twice I had to jump start the car. So right after buying new snow tires, the next day we were over there buying a new battery. But 3 years is about what you can expect on something like that anyway. And Ian brought up the thing about having a shovel in the car. That was one of the things I wanted to talk about anyway. There are a lot of places that are selling these little folding plastic shovels that look nice and they fit in your car. And the first time you get stuck, they either break or you try to have to chip a little ice. Actually, I got one here that I was going to bring up. This is one my wife found. It's called a trunk buddy. And it's a little about 3 foot, but it's a substantial, heavy-duty handle, steel blade. It fits in her car very well. I put a big shovel in mine, but I've got a Jeep, so it doesn't matter. In any event, avoid some of those little toy shovels that I try to sell you. They don't do the job.
Ian also mentioned jumper cables, and I think jumper cables are a great idea, but make sure you know how to use them, because I've seen way too many people hook them up backwards and completely fry the computer in their car. Mm-hmm. So make sure you know what you're doing when you hook up your jumper cables. Don't just say, "Oh, I don't know what I'm doing here. Just hook it up." Make sure you know what you're doing. Gary, you wanted to say something with that?
And in the right places, you can buy safety glasses for $2.
Good point. Good point.
I've only seen 2 batteries blow up, but it's an ugly sight. It's acid all over the place.
I have seen people put the jumper cables on the wrong terminals, so they swapped positive and negative. If your battery cables start smoking and melting, you've got one of your battery terminals switched, so you better start taking a careful look at both sides, because when you're the third person to come along and they're like, I don't know what happened, but both these jumper cable sets melted. Could you help us? Chances are somebody's hooking up the battery backwards on one of the terminals. So make sure to look for the positive and negative, which is typically not just noted in color, but on the battery, it's usually stamped in with a little plus sign and a negative sign.
point. Good point. Thank you very much for that, Julie. Gary, do you have anything that you'd like to share that's unrelated to cars? And then we'll come back to cars with Harry.
Well, snow blowers, they have tires,
Okay.
they have motors. So
That's true.
I have to air the tire up every year or two. I use the treated gas, the sea foam. I keep a little sea foam in so the gas doesn't go bad. And a trick I do, I think it might be fairly common. I take silicone spray, aerosol spray, and spray down the throat. I spray it exactly where the thing clogs up with wet snow. And it seems to take care of about 2/3 of the problem. It doesn't cure it altogether, but I do that treatment when it's dry and let it dry. And I seem to have a lot better performance that way with the snowblower.
I'm guessing that silicone spray would also work well on a shovel if you have a shovel that the snow is sticking to.
Sure would.
I don't know if that works better than the cooking spray or not.
Well, you'll do a half and half study and find out for us.
There you go. We'll have to do some testing.
The other small item is put your orange poles out, and I only put one out. It's at a drain in the street that we like to be able to find to unplug on ice and let the water drain. It would really be nice, and I have not done this, to have your water meter, the one out in the yard, out by the sidewalk. It'd be nice to have dimensions where that is, or stick an orange pole out there, because wouldn't that be an awful thing not to be able to find it if you needed it? Want me to keep going?
Oh, let's go and see what Ian and Julie have, if they have anything they want to share. Ian, what would you like to share? Do you have
new
anything?
topic or what?
Well, you can do a new topic if you'd like. What would you like to share about something that you do to prepare for winter or for storms?
Well, so seeing as how we have a storm upon us, there's the possibility, with the ice and everything, several of us could lose power. Some people have generators, some don't, but everyone should have flashlights available and batteries, and the time to look for them and make sure they work is when you have power, and so that you have them available. And if you do matches or candles, make sure you have matches, but then obviously don't leave those unattended. Animals can, pets can knock them over, and obviously if you leave the house, don't leave them burning, or don't leave them unattended. And then I guess if you're gonna burn candles, you should probably have a fire extinguisher handy. So
good suggestions. Julie, anything you'd like to share about that?
Well, Ian and I had been talking about it beforehand. Yeah, it's great if you have a generator. If you do, make sure you have fresh gas for it. Same with your snowblower. If that got covered while I was out of power, sorry. Try to keep your gas fresh, and if it's older, like from last season, and it's the same kind of gas you'd put in your car, dump it in your car and go get some fresh stuff for your generator, as well as for your snowblower, to make sure that they're likely to work when you need them to work.
I know what.
Go ahead.
Ian mentioned making sure you have matches or a lighter and candles, which is a great idea. Normally we have one of our instructors, Tim, joining us. Tim wasn't able to join us tonight, but Tim does a lot of work with insurance companies after fires. And he said you would not believe how many house fires are caused by unattended candles. So make sure that your candle is on something that is not flammable. Make sure you are not walking away and leaving it there. He said one thing a lot of people do is they'll have one of the candles that's in a jar, and if it's sitting a little bit crooked, once it liquefies, the candle wick slides to one side, heats up the glass too much, breaks the glass, and the wax and the flame goes out into the rest of the, and starts something else on fire. So candle safety is a very important thing if your power is out as well, or if you're, anytime you're burning candles. So good points.
I'd like to add, anytime you're using any fuel in your house, it's important to be extremely careful. There's going to be, if power goes out, there might be a temptation to bring in a propane heater or a kerosene heater into your house. Propane heaters in particular do not belong in your house. They are really only for outside or extremely well ventilated areas like a garage in the fall, not for inside. The combustion products are poisonous, and you shouldn't use them indoors to try to heat anything. And kerosene, if you're going to use it indoors, which I don't recommend because it stinks, extremely well ventilated, as close to somewhere exterior as possible, and be extremely mindful. Don't go to sleep with that kind of thing on. Another major cause of house fires and possibly carbon monoxide poisoning if you're not really careful. So just be really careful if you're trying to heat or get things warm. Do it the safest way possible.
Good points. Harry or Gary, you guys both have some experience in working with fire departments and so on. Anything you want to add on any of those things?
Well, go ahead, Gary. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. The candles. Candles scare me. Candles and cats and knocking them over. Yeah, just be really careful that way. Things like electric heaters. If you're going to use electric heaters, plug them straight into the outlet, or if you have to run an extension cord, make sure you've got a 14 gauge cord on hand. Not lamp cord, but a 14 gauge.
Yeah, so he means like a fat kind that you might otherwise use for outside or something, not like the little skinny kind of flat 2-part one that you might use to plug like a lamp or something else small in a little further away. Use a fat round one. Yeah, the fattest round one you can find around your place.
Actually, I do photography for the Oshno Fire Department, and actually we've been pretty good. We haven't had much in the way of house fires. Most of the structure fire runs that we've been having have really ended up being false alarms. Someone's security system, which will have a fire detector in it, it goes off, and it ends up being just a smoke, a burnt food kind of thing. This is not the kind of cord as you were bringing out. This is not a cord that you put into a space heater of any sort. The other thing is, you brought up the fat cord. Okay, there's a nice fat cord. It's on one of these little. The problem is, copper is more expensive than plastic. And so a lot of manufacturers will put this nice thick cord on here, but again, it's got a thin wire on the inside. So check it. Make sure it's 14 to 12 gauge wire. And as Gary mentioned, the best thing to do is plug it right into an outlet. Try not to use any kind of extension cord with an electric heater.
And even then, after about 2 hours, run your hand down the cord and see how hot it is. It may be hot enough that you want to unplug it at night.
And that's true.
Yeah.
When I was on another fire department many, many years ago, a lot of the fires started happening because people would run the cords, more or less as a permanent thing, under rugs and so on. And nothing else I can really say about that.
So you don't want to run it under a rug. You don't want to run it inside of a wall. You don't want to run it through your ceiling or anywhere like that where you can't inspect it and you can't see it.
Extension cords are not permanent wiring, plain and simple. People use them as such. I mean, I've been guilty of running a few things that the cord is more or less suspended, more or less for lighting. I certainly wouldn't do that for any kind of a power tool, and especially not a heater.
As long as we're talking about, fire safety with candles and everything, if you're going to the store for flashlight batteries, pick up some fresh smoke detector batteries and swap those babies out, because they should get changed twice a year. Most people, we suggest to do it when you're changing your time, your time on your clocks, because that's an easy way to remember. Or pick up one of the new lithium ion batteries that are supposed to have a much longer shelf life. So make sure your smoke detectors are in good working order is the point.
Good suggestion. What do you guys suggest if the power goes out? How do people stay warm?
Well, one thing I don't use is a natural gas range or furnace or a stove. They do a fine job with cooking, but if you leave them on for any length of time, the CO, the carbon monoxide levels can really raise in your house, and it can cause a lot of blue lips or worse.
Good point. And we see that a lot with Community Homeworks folks, where the furnace stops working and we go to the house to inspect it, and we find that they're trying to heat their house with their oven. So not a good choice. Do not use your oven or your gas range. What is it acceptable to use to heat your house or to stay warm if your power goes out?
Well, you're not going to use an electric heater.
True.
If you've got a fireplace, although they do draw a lot more heat than they actually give you, at least there's something. When we've had issues like that, lots of blankets. I mean, that's what it comes down to. Mm-hmm. And if it's at all possible, if you can get out of the house and go somewhere else, that's fine. But, that can be very difficult and very costly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And if you keep your house... I'm sorry, go ahead, Ian.
Oh, I was just going to say, to keep warm, extra layers of clothing, put a hat on, the old saying I think my grandfather taught me is like, if your feet are cold, put a hat on, So, but yeah, like extra layers of clothing, lots of blankets. Yeah. So.
Portable generators can be fairly inexpensive and enough to just keep a house going. Yeah, but you set it outside. You don't have it in the house, in the garage. You have it outside. You have plenty of cords. I do a little thing. I've done a little thing on my furnace that looks like this. There it is. And so I come down to the switch, and out of the switch box, I go out with a piece of 14 gauge heavy duty extension cord, actually air conditioner cord. And I go out and back in right there. I can unplug my furnace and hook the generator in right there.
Oh.
And I may be the only one that does this. But most people do not want to open up their own breaker panel, their own furnace, and be doing this in the dead of night when they just got the generator fired up. So that's kind of a do-ahead kind of project.
And you switch the
that's
switch
something
off
you'd want
on
to
the
hire.
furnace so that you isolate it from the panel. You pull
Just
the plug.
unplugging it alone disconnects it from the breaker.
Okay, so you're isolated from the panel with that.
Right.
Okay.
And
Which
then
brings
I
up
plug
a
in and
good
go.
point. If you have a generator, you want to make sure that it's connected correctly. Otherwise, you risk frying the guy who's trying to repair your line and get you back online. So make sure that it's hooked up correctly. Make sure you have an electrician do that for you. I wanted to welcome Sam to the feed. Here comes Sam. Hi, Sam. Welcome. You are muted, Sam. So if you're wanting us to hear you, you're going to have to unmute. But and Sam has taught classes for us for quite a while as well. We're glad you're here, Sam. We were just talking about fire safety and generator safety and some things like that. So I forget who was up. Who had talked about that? Gary had talked about generator hooking it up to his furnace, so that was interesting. But most people aren't going to do that on the spur of the moment. They're going to need to have an electrician or somebody help them with that as well. So good to know.
But you do want to have enough. You do want to have enough cords to run to the furnace, run to the fridge. Run to the different places.
Mm-hmm. Sounds great.
I just wanted to mention, because we were talking about, if it's cold in your house, what to do for yourself, but don't forget what to do for your house. If you do lose power and it's very cold, it's a good idea to always have a tap running at a real slow trickle so that your pipes don't freeze, and have some backup water on hand, whether it's, you filled some containers you had from the tap, or you brought some extra bottled water home. In either way, have access to some water that you can use for, the basics, which is, putting it in yourself. But yeah, if you make sure you've got water on hand and that you are considering your pipes and whether or not they might freeze, and that you're taking care of those as well.
That's a great idea to keep your tap running, and that's something that works if you're connected to city water. But if you've got your own well, that doesn't really work if the power's out. Do you have any experience with that, Sam?
Well, just to reiterate Julie's point there, I just went out and brought home 5 gallons of water with me with this current storm that we've got coming, just in case we get hit a little worse than they're predicted. I am on a well here. I fortunately can drain my system into a sump pump. So if I don't have power, I can't pump the sump pump out. But there is capacity there for getting most of the water out of my system into the well container.
So you would drain it out of your system just so that your pipes don't freeze. Is that correct?
Yeah, if I'm home.
Okay.
Fortunately, it's never gotten that cold. But that's always my plan. If I had to, that's what I would do. So.
Great idea.
So
and even in some really very cold sub-zero weather, it could take 2 or 3 days for your pipes to freeze, unless, of course, you've got like a crawl space that isn't heated or got a lot of air flowing through it, or in a mobile home where you've got the opening underneath. But a typical home with a basement, you got 2, 3, 4, even as much as 4 days before you got to worry about those pipes really freezing, unless they're very close to an uninsulated wall.
I think that's very common, Harry, that the pipes are close to an uninsulated wall. So it's just my personal experience.
We actually did a class about 2 weeks ago about frozen pipes. So if there's people watching who want to know more about what to do in case of frozen pipes or how to avoid them, go back and watch that class from a couple weeks ago. It was a really good class. But he was talking a lot about how, most people want their kitchen sink on an exterior wall so they can look outside, which inherently causes problems because the exterior wall is where it's going to get the coldest. So it's a challenge to keep those areas warm enough that it's not freezing up.
And it's common to leave the kitchen cabinet door open under the sink.
Right.
That helps.
Right.
It should go unspoken that we make sure to close all the basement windows and tighten things up, but I have known that to go overlooked.
I'm embarrassed to admit that I just realized that a couple of my storm windows were still open last week. So you might want to, if you have exterior storms, you might want to go close those before the next storm. Or if you've got interior storms too, make sure they're in place as well. I know Sam's a big advocate of interior storms, and Julie's a big advocate of storm windows, period, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And even, you know, sometimes you just tack up a blanket over your window to help keep the cold out. You know, it doesn't have to be fancy. It can just be what you have available. But yeah, like we have some kind of heavier blackout curtains. And I opened them up to get some light in yesterday, and I was amazed at how much colder it got in that room. Because we have an older house with, you know, original wood windows and then a storm. And when I opened up those curtains, you know, those curtains were providing a lot more insulation than I realized, I guess. So yeah, when I had a little less money in college, I tacked up a blanket over the windows, and that works pretty well too. So yeah, anything to keep out the draft when you're trying to stay warm.
It's that trade-off between solar gain from the sun shining in and how much is the leaky window going to cool your house off. So yeah, it's a hard one to figure out. All right, go ahead, Gary.
As we get into snowstorms, the furnace intake and exhaust, the ones that are plastic vented, there are times that the snow can actually pile up over them, so it's something to keep cleared, and the intakes can get frosted over with moisture, and it's good to know how to clean that up, because it will shut the furnace off, and you know you will get charged an entire service call to do a very simple little job.
And we see that a lot with community homeworks as well. You know, the neighbor ends up snow blowing the snow against your house and plugs up your intake, and you don't realize it. So go check those plastic pipes if you have a high efficiency furnace to make sure that those are clear before you call for a service call. So great idea. Great idea. Anybody else have anything for furnaces or for trying to stay warm during this time?
So Ian was talking about some things with your hot water heater. If you lose power, Ian, did you want to?
Well, yeah. So, you know, if you do lose power, if you do have natural gas, and if you have a traditional tank style water heater, if it's a vented, you know, like a traditional flue vent, you know, that should still operate, you know, even in the event of a power loss. So you could still have hot water. But if it looks like a motor that's on the top of it and it's got the PVC pipe running sideways out of the side of the house, you know, you won't be able to use that when the power goes out.
So if you have one of these on the top of your water heater, you're probably okay in a power outage.
Yes.
If you have a piece of plastic pipe coming out of it, you're probably not okay in a power outage.
Yes.
Which is one of the things we deal with a lot at Community Homeworks also, because we usually put in power vent water heaters to try to keep the carbon monoxide to a minimum in people's homes. But then if the power goes out, you have no hot water. So once again, it's okay, carbon monoxide or hot water during a power outage. So.
And we have a tankless, which I believe you guys put in a lot of tankless as well. And yeah,
we do, yes.
If our power goes out, yeah, we just I think we lose our hot water because we can't. The ignition doesn't turn on. There's it doesn't work altogether. So yeah, you gotta hope for short outages or be prepared with, you know, things like a small generator. that maybe you can, run something for a few hours here and run something for a few hours there. And, if you can, a bigger generator can run more, but that's not necessarily the kind of thing you can do on the spot in a snowstorm. So
True.
You've
Sam,
got
anything to add about that with water heaters? How do you do it? How do you do it out in the country? Sam, you're muted.
I'm sorry, I'm slow on the draw here.
That's fine.
So, I don't have too much issue with it. Well, I have a boiler system for heating the house, and so my hot water tank is tied to that. And so
I see.
During the heating season, I have like an overabundance of hot water just from the piping hydrostatically flowing through there. So, but fortunately I have a gas cooktop, so I just boil water when I've had issues with my hot water tank in the past. So, and as long
but your boiler doesn't function if power is out. Is that correct?
it does not. No.
Okay.
So, but so I don't have any hot water or access. If power goes out, my pump's out, which means I lose water pressure pretty quick. So.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. Harry or Gary, anything to add with hot water?
No, I know we've got the power, but we've got the power hot water tank, which I love, but in a power outage, we've been fortunate. As many times as been outages around here, we've been lucky. We haven't had one. And probably tonight's going to be the one. That's because I haven't said it. It could happen. But
keeping our fingers crossed.
We've been fortunate. Although we bought this house, and I remember the night I signed the papers. Actually, it was the night we sold our other house. We did it by candlelight on my cell phone because we were here. It's almost 5 years ago, and it was a big power outage. My son's house was out of power. My daughter's house was out of power, and my house was still in Plymouth. So, I had to do it.
Yeah.
And that can probably get a segue about using a cell phone. I'll go back to the auto if you want to do that.
Let's do it. Let's do it, Harry. Back to
almost everybody's got a cell phone, or at least most people do. But one thing you got to keep in your car is a charger. I've got a charger. I can charge two different cell phones. One because my wife has a different kind of outlet. I've got the iPhone kind. She's got an Android kind. I don't think we've ever used it. But if you get stuck for any length of time, and I go back, was it last month or a month ago when they had that big traffic jam in Virginia, and people were there for 20 hours or so? Well, that cell phone's not going to last forever, especially if you're playing games while you're bored sitting there waiting for somebody to come and get you. Which is another thing, if you're going to be out and about, even you could be driving from Kalamazoo to Battle Creek or Kalamazoo to Paw Paw and end up in a traffic situation on I-94, and you could be stuck there for hours. And one of the things we keep in our cars during the wintertime, blankets. We have a couple blankets in there. Boots. We have boots back in the hatch area. And I know we're going to be going to Chicago on the weekend. We're going to have high energy snacks in the car, along with some water. And, the snacks are good. Flaming Hot Cheetos are not high energy snacks. Okay. So, something like granola bars, nuts, peanut butter. Actually, I'd rather freeze and eat peanut butter, but that's my personal opinion. And, Gary brought it up too. He has an electric car. You have a hybrid or do you have a full electric, Gary?
Hybrid.
Okay. I was thinking about these people with these full electric cars that got stuck there in the Virginia thing. The battery does not have as long a life in cold weather. And they use resistance heating for the inside of that car too, correct?
Right.
So I think there might have been some cold folks there waiting, because some of them had to wait as much as 20 hours.
So one of the things you should do with an electric car is have heated seats and a heated wheel. So, you could turn the cabin heat way low, but keep the seat heater hot and barely take any power. So you could go for quite a long while.
That's good to know, especially the way we've been pushing these electric cars nowadays. But
yeah. They're
and if you do, if you have a conventional internal combustion car, you can run your heater a little bit. Of course, again, we're talking about better having a half tank of gas or more. But you don't have to stand and run the car the whole time you're there. Just enough to warm up the cabin, shut it down, and maybe that's the one time you should get out of the car to make sure that exhaust pipe is clear. Because if it's not, it can be pumping carbon monoxide back in the car, and that's not a very good situation at all. And the other thing I would say is, if you end up in a situation like that, if at all possible, stay with your vehicle, because the vehicle's better than trying to be out in the wilderness or out in the country someplace, and help will come and find your car. They may not find you.
A cold car is a lot more protection than being out there.
Exactly.
Yes.
Good points, Harry. Good points. I forget where I was going to go from there. I had something else I was going to add. But, I know what I wanted to say. If you're tuning in and you have questions or comments about what we're saying, please put it in the comment section. We don't have too many. We haven't had too many comments come in. We've mostly had people writing in just saying where they're joining us from, and that's great. But if you have a question or a comment, something that you would like to add from out there in online world, please write it in and let us know what you're thinking, or write your question. We'll try to answer it. So I feel like we've gone over a lot of kind of vague areas already. We've spoken some on cars, we've spoken some on water heaters, we've spoken some on furnaces. Gary, what did you want to add?
I can bring up two odd things. The thing where the ice and snow pile up, and all of a sudden you've got a puddle up against the foundation. You've literally got meltwater right up against the foundation, begging to seep through the walls. When it's possible, you dig a path for that water to get away. You really don't want that kind of thing happening. And then the other thing I've only been involved in a little bit are the tapes on a roof, the heat tapes on a roof. Mm-hmm. And maybe the other fellows have more experience than I do with this, but there we go.
Julie does.
Sorry, I'm not a fella, but same idea.
You could be a fella tonight if you want to be, Julie.
My mistake.
No worries. So those heat tapes or things that you can use to prevent ice dams, and ice dams is just a fancy term for a massive amount of ice building up on the edge of your roof, what we used to call icicles back in the day. So those can be effective, but they do need to be put up before the major snow and ice fall. If you've already got the major snow and ice dam buildup, that's not the time where you can use that kind of solution. So if you'd like to approach that kind of thing because you've had that problem before, it's just something you need to put up when you don't currently have a snow and ice buildup on your house. And then I'm going to turn it over to Ian because I think he knows some things about what might be the problems you'll encounter if you do get significant ice dams, and how to do your best DIY fix for it in the short term.
Yeah, the ice dam is formed when all the snow melts in your roof. Usually it's heat loss through your ceiling or through your attic, It runs down the house, and then it hits that cold edge, and then it freezes. And then what happens is that will work its way kind of underneath the shingles and then end up, like leaking back into your house. Obviously, like it's helpful to add either ventilation into the attic, add extra insulation. Obviously, that doesn't help when you already have the ice dams, but obviously once you have them, you probably want to take a roof rake and kind of remove the last few feet of snow off the edge, so that way you can get that ice kind of melted off of there, because otherwise they'll just kind of keep building up, and when it melts, there's nowhere for all the water to go. So definitely want to try to keep that clear.
So some of these are things that you look at and sort out, and you can do next summer for the future.
That is true, but you can always give yourself a roof rake, which is just a really long pole that you can scrape snow off your house. But sorry, Sam, what were you about to say?
I was just curious, is there any good products to use to melt the ice off the edge of your roof? Like
I was in the store the other day, and I saw a kind of a salt product intended to be thrown up on the roof.
Yep, you can buy those.
Yeah, there are some things out there.
Throw them up there. Thank you. I forgot all about it.
I know some detrimental to your, if you have asphalt shingles, they're detrimental to that. So I just was curious if there's specific brands or specific material. But obviously, if they're dead for roofs. Sorry, Jason.
I know that Tim, who joins us on a lot of these workshops, has one that he's done quite a few times, where he gets calcium chloride and puts it in a piece of pantyhose, ties the end of the pantyhose off, and puts it up over the roof, so that let's see if I could do this. If the roof is this direction, going the same direction as that across the ice dam, not to melt off all of the ice, but to make a path for the water to come down through. And he said, according to Tim, it isn't great for your shingles, but it's much better than, and the insurance companies would rather have you do that and replace your roof than they would have to replace stuff from flooding inside your house from ice dams.
Right.
So it's sort of the lesser of the two evils when it comes to that.
You said that was calcium chloride that he's using?
I think it was calcium chloride that he was suggesting.
Okay.
Oh, here's one that we're supposed to know anyway, but know where the main water shutoff is in your house. Know where that is. Should a pipe burst, you run right to it and close it.
And the main gas shutoff.
Yeah.
So that you can turn off the gas to the house. Another important thing
And
to know.
the main
Both of those things are very important.
All that is.
Okay. There you go.
It's interesting because in this house, I know where my water shutoff is. It's in the basement. Should it have to shut off at the street key? Mine's buried under about 2.5 feet of dirt. I don't know how that happened. I know in the houses I was building, we had adjustable, the stop box that we could raise and lower. I couldn't raise this one any further. I found it when we had our sprinkler system put in. It was marked, and I found it. I tried to raise it, and it's just not going to go. So it's, if I got to shut it off at the street, I'm in trouble.
And that's something most homeowners aren't even going to know how to do or have the tools to do. That's something that the city's going to need to shut off for them. But I don't know what your situation is where you live, Harry, about who would do that. But
piece of conduit with a slot cut in the bottom will do the job.
True. We're almost out of time. Does anyone have anything else they wanted to share that they didn't get to share that's really pressing on their minds? Sam, I'm sure has a list of about 600 things.
I don't. So I'm not sure what you guys talked about. One thing, kind of getting back to what you were talking about earlier with the storm window not being closed this time, is just making sure your windows are closed, right? I have double hung windows. It's real noticeable when they're locked and unlocked this time of year. Once they're locked, they seal together, pulling the weather stripping together, so that's something I always recommend to people. But I don't know. It seems we're talking more preparedness kind of things and winter storms. So I don't have any. We seem to have covered most of the things that, besides the candles and flashlights and not relying on your phone as a flashlight.
Good point.
Once you drop it or something happens to it, or you want to wear your battery down. That way, if you have limited power supply, so I like to have a headlamp and a flashlight. So
good suggestions. I appreciate that. Julie or Ian, do either of you have anything else you wanted to share that's pressing?
I don't think I have anything, but I do thank Harry for sharing that little trunk shovel. I didn't know that existed, but I'm gonna have to get myself one of those. It's pretty cool.
I don't know where to find it around here. We picked it up when we lived on the east side, but it's Yardwork, so it's a brand name. Probably one of the hardware stores. If they don't have it, they can probably get it for you. I mean, if Gales doesn't have it, I don't think anybody does.
Yep.
You might find something similar that's not called a trunk buddy, but it might be called a potato shovel, and it's just going to be a short little 3-foot shovel. And it's going to have a similar square end. I don't know if you want to hold that up again, Harry, but but it will have a metal blade, and it'll do the job. That one I think is Menard's brand, but yeah, Gales has a similar product, so
it does fit nicely into a smaller car. I mean, at that time we had a smaller one. Now, my wife's SUV could probably handle the small bulldozer. It's a different story.
I do want to. I did have a couple of other things I wanted to mention. As far as if you do lose power and you're just trying to stay warm, circling back to what Sam was talking about, what we've talked about a little bit more is the air sealing. Do go around and make sure all your storm windows, all your actual windows, they're all closed and they've got like locks on them, and that those locks are engaged to try to keep the air out. If you've got something that's where you can feel a lot of air infiltration, say under a door or something, towels or a blanket rolled up and stuck under there is going to help keep that air out. And then, sometimes it's just not going to be enough, and there are resources, there are places you can go. The city will open warming centers if necessary, and one of the ways that you can find those resources is to call 211. And if you still have power on your cell phone, you can go to mi211.org, and they can direct you toward the resources that are available locally to you right then, like a warming center, or they can direct you to the kinds of resources you might need in a kind of emergency situation or a urgent situation. An emergency would call for 911, but 211 can help you in an urgent situation.
Great. Thank you, Julie. I appreciate it. Anybody else? Gary, Harry?
All set.
All right. I wanted to thank you guys all very much for joining us tonight. A lot of great information that we got out to people. So thank you very much for doing that. I also wanted to thank the people who were able to join us. It looks like we had Daniel and Dorothy and Brendan and Karen all joining us at one point or another. I'm not sure if we had any others or not, but we appreciate them tuning in as well. So thank you all very much. We will have another class coming up next Tuesday. Next Tuesday is going to be plumbing systems with Lee and Lee Taylor, who has taught a lot of our classes. So tune in next Tuesday at 6 for that. Otherwise, thank you very much for joining us this evening, folks. And stay safe, stay warm during this coming storm.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you, everyone.